created everything. Look what a powerful being you are. You did these things, but now you're in a human body, you forget the power you have.
What you do is what the whole universe is doing at the place you call here and now. You are something the whole universe is doing in the same way that a wave is something that the whole ocean is doing.
You're doing it.
Doing what?
Using your imagination.
Welcome to Metamystics, where you don't know what you don't know. My name's Jonathan.
I'm Sean.
And today we have a very, very fascinating guest. Welcome to the show, Mario of Symbolic Studies.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, man.
Hey, man, we are just so fascinated by all of your work and all of your research. I mean, the way that you're able to break down everything symbolically and, almost looking at it through, probably really looking at it through like an occult lens, which that's right up our alley, baby. We want to know all of the symbolism and really try and understand it. And, this is something that it bothers me when people are like, those people 1,500, 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, they were just dumber, or, you know what I mean? It's like, man, I firmly believe that humanity is devolving from that, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, exactly. No, I'm of the same opinion. And there's a lot of good reason to believe that that's the case. And my type of symbolism, like the school I kind of found myself involved in, some people refer to it as traditionalism or perennialism, and they give a lot of credit to older civilizations and what they were interested in and how they saw things and sort of how they lived their life and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of my time is trying to understand sort of the old way of doing things, because I'm of the same mindset, basically.
Oh yeah, dude. We actually have a couple of people that are pretty heavily involved into the occult as guests come on the show every so often, whether it be witches or magicians or wizards or sorcerers, or just fascinated by those kind of conversations. And what they all say is that if you're doing some kind of magic or a spell or an incantation or anything like that, you want to make sure you get to know who it is that you're, basically talking to or trying to have a conversation with on the other side, because the more information that you have about them, maybe it helps carry out the spell or whatever a little bit easier.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't really, one of the things I've heard so many times is you think you're talking to something and then it ends up being something else, and that they've been lying to you or deceiving you or whatever you want to say. So that's not so much my world personally on a personal experience kind of level, but I've read a lot about all that kind of stuff for sure.
Man, I would love to know, what are your experiences that led you to this in the first place, if you don't mind me asking? Because
oh no, of course.
I feel like most people get, they start looking into this kind of stuff whenever they have some mind-blowing experience. Usually, I think it's from the use of psychedelics, which was kind of our introduction to it.
Yeah.
Or, maybe it was just some movies that you were watching when you were growing up. Maybe I don't know. What was your experience?
Yeah, psychedelics did play a part, if I'm being honest with you, for sure, because it really opened me up to a whole new level of awareness. And that's when I really started getting into conspiratorial information, alternative information, all that kind of stuff. And so I really got kind of far out with that. But basically, I've been an artist my whole entire life. And so I've always been very visual, and I used to illustrate a lot. And I've always just paid attention to things on a visual level. And so I got into graphic design when I was a teenager. And so I've been doing design work ever since then. So I'm in my early 40s now, been doing that since I was 15 or 16 years old. I started off doing design work for my local punk and hardcore and metal scene. That was sort of my thing. And so I was doing a lot of flyers and t-shirts and album covers and whatnot. Eventually, I started doing more corporate work and started finding clients that had real businesses and stuff. And over the years, I've worked with a ton of huge corporations now and lots of small businesses and mom and pop shops. So I've had the experience of being able to do design work for a whole spectrum of different, clients. And over time, I became very interested in film as well. So I went to film school for a few years, got really interested in a few directors and a few classic movies that really inspired me to want to pursue filmmaking. And over the years, at some point, I actually came across a symbolic dictionary. This was probably in like 2008. And I didn't realize that you can actually make a study of symbolism. And so I bought this book at a bookstore and I was reading about the symbolism of, the different animals that exist and colors and numbers and everything else, different sigils and glyphs and whatnot that I had seen my whole entire life. And I realized that actually studying this was making me a better designer. And so it was helping inform my designs and kind of come up with new ideas that kind of fit with, the brand or whatever, whoever I was working with. And at a certain point, I just became really interested in buying more books on symbolism. And so now I have a really good library. I actually think that that's one of the things that kind of makes me a little unique in this space is that most of the information I'm getting from books. And I found over the years too that a lot of the older books have better information, kind of speaking to what you're saying. And so a lot of the newer books, there's something to be desired there, but a lot of the older books have a lot of really good content. And then I started finding the symbologists that were really, really doing like amazing work. And so I just kept on pursuing it. And at some point, I found the tarot. And really, the tarot is what completely opened me up to everything else. So astrology, kind of more esoteric stuff, occultism, different parts of mythology and numerology and whatnot. And so once I found the tarot and once I took that seriously and started reading about the tarot and collecting books on that, I'm a big reader. It was off to the races pretty much. And then I felt like I really needed to create a platform for me to kind of get some of this stuff off my chest because I realized that, especially in today's world, you can overconsume. And if you're just consuming but not putting anything out, I think that can lead to an imbalance. And so I felt like I needed to sort of balance the scales in a way. And symbolic studies was sort of my way of doing that.
I want to say first of all, like, good on you, man, for being able to make a business and really do what you love. Like, you're creating stuff. I feel like you would already be creating stuff even if you weren't making money off of it. And so I think that that's really awesome that you were able to find that area of business for yourself. And I wanted to ask you a question. Now that you've got a very in-depth understanding of all of the symbols and symbolism and the meaning and all of this, do you find it, I don't want to say difficult, but do you find it I don't know how to say that, but as far as just walking around in the world and like not noticing everything around you that's supposed
Right.
to be hidden, but you kind of see it so blatantly.
Like Rowdy Roddy Piper and They Live.
Right,
Yeah, right.
yeah, consume, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. That is funny. I'll say that just going out and about and seeing billboards and magazine covers and just different ads and everything, I do have another awareness of things. I think that's beyond what most people. Obviously, most people don't get into symbolism, so they're not going to see certain things, let alone get into occultism or esoteric studies or anything
Right.
like that. So I do pick up a lot of information, but one of the things I'll say that frustrates me the most is being online and hearing people's take on symbolism. And
Right.
so it's one of these interesting things where, of course, everyone should have an opinion and should have their own perspective. But I see a lot of really bad takes regarding symbolism, especially when it comes to the world stage and when it comes to kind of conspiratorial type things and things that are kind of happening out there. I've tried to get into fundamental symbolism. And in fact, one of my favorite books ever, just a quick shout out for anyone who wants to really deepen their awareness of symbolism, Fundamental Symbols by this guy named Rene Guénon. I think he's one of the best symbologists of the modern world, basically. And so that's one of my top recommended books for anybody. And
Cool.
so I've gotten interested in like fundamental symbols. What's the meaning of the square or the dot or the circle, the triangle, the pyramid, the column, really basic sorts of things. And because I have that, it is a little frustrating kind of seeing people's takes on things online when they don't have that sort of background or whatever.
Mhm.
But I kind of just accept it as one of those things where I feel blessed that I kind of found this in my life, and I feel blessed that I was able to pursue this, and kind of it fits really well with design, you know.
Hmm.
So I've become a much better designer having gone down this road or whatever. But usually when I'm kind of seeing things, you know, for myself and stuff, I actually just am able to appreciate sort of you know, just multiple layers of what they're
Right.
trying to convey and everything else. And it's
Hmm.
actually really surprising too what you do see out there when you're really symbolically literate. It's really
Yeah.
wild, you know.
That's
Oh
awesome.
yeah, dude. I don't know if you would be if you're into this kind of stuff, but do you ever feel like do you ever find yourself applying any kind of symbolism to your life? Maybe like do you believe that it holds any kind of symbolic power inside of the mind to be able to help you manifest this or to help you with that?
Right. That's a great question. You know, I'm of two minds with that because on one level, I know some people who are incredibly intuitive and they have a great head on their shoulders and they even have like really profound spiritual insights, but they don't read books and they're not kind of doing this sort of journey, and they're just kind of observing things. And that's kind of one of the interesting things about symbolism. You can actually become more proficient in your symbolic awareness just by paying attention to things.
Mhm.
You know, you don't need to do anything too wild or too crazy or do like too much research. Just contemplate.
Mhm.
Contemplate and think like why would it make sense that a bird represents this or that, or the color green represents this or that? It's like just pay attention to the world around you. It's amazing the things you'll sort of pick up. Um, but, you know, I would say that probably the most practical thing for me has been my artwork and my design work for clients. That's a real sort of tangible kind of
Mhm.
thing that I have, you know, in my toolkit is my symbolic awareness of things. As far as maybe like manifestation or things like that, I see that a lot of the things, now that I know a lot of this symbolism, you know, I can kind of admit that a lot of it is actually like an intellectual pursuit. You know, it's like a very cerebral sort of thing. And
Mhm.
so I think it kind of works with me more on that level than like anything else. Maybe actually a better answer would be it's helped me avoid a lot of things, to be honest with you.
Right.
You know, where I kind of see certain groups doing this or that, saying this or that or whatever, and little red flags kind of go off. And I'm like, oh, you know, actually, this is not for me. And I know it's
Right.
not for me. And
Right.
so it's helped me sort of curate things like that in my life, you know, I would say for sure.
Love it.
Yeah,
That's like
dude.
some symbolic street smarts for you. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? You're
Yeah.
yeah,
not really
yeah.
fooled by anything.
Well, and I
That's it.
imagine
That's a huge part of it. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
imagine, you know, you're able to see all the symbolism and almost apply it to just about every form of spirituality and religion out there and kind of compare and contrast and see, you know, like are they talking about the same thing over here? Is this a story pulled from another story, from a more ancient story and it's all just encoded in symbolism like that?
Exactly. Exactly right. Yeah. So my personal opinion, I never thought that I would follow a school of thought or a kind of a crowd or a group of people that had like an identity of any kind. I've always been more like a lone wolf sort of guy. But the best symbologists, just to like cut to the chase, in my opinion, in the modern world, are people who come from the traditionalist camp. So they're called traditionalists or perennialists. And Rene Guénon, the guy who I mentioned, he's kind of like the godfather for a lot of these guys. And their basic sort of way of looking at everything is that their opinion is that there was one tradition that preceded all other traditions. And all
Mhm.
traditions basically came from that original tradition. And so it's not unlike a world tree where you have many branches, many leaves, you know, you have roots and a whole system down there, but it's all unified by that trunk, right? So that
Mhm.
there's a unifying sort of principle or there's a unifying force. And that is basically the basis. That's kind of the core of how they look at everything. And this actually extends over to their metaphysics as well, and how they kind of their metaphysical framework and how they see things working on that level. So, you know, basically, one of the things that I've learned is that symbolism is really the language of metaphysics. That's really why it's important, is because it's encoding metaphysical truths.
Mhm.
And it's been found over the years that it's easier to encode something, you know, in a glyph or a symbol or a sigil or something like that than it would be to even like write anything about it.
Oh, that's
So
perfect.
so literally symbolism is the bridge to metaphysics, and that's why it's so significant. And so once I found that out too, then a lot of other things started kind of unfolding for me, where I realized now like the true power of symbolism, and why it's so significant around the world, and kind of like what you're saying, why so many traditions or cultures have overlapping themes, between everything. And so I feel like now, because I have like a fundamental sort of understanding of things, it's like I see stuff from all over the world that relates to each other, basically. And it's probably because of this original tradition, that there was one tradition that preceded all others.
What do you think that is that one tradition astrology? Was that the original tradition, or was there even a tradition that, preceded that?
Yeah, it actually there's a whole tradition. There's astrology, actually, modern day astrology is not exactly what people think it is. And I've done a lot of work on this, actually. And if people are interested in my more like long form content, I have a ton of stuff on my YouTube. So if they check out my Instagram or TikTok or Twitter, they're going to see shorter things. But I've done a ton of presentations that are like, an hour, 2 hour long, 2 hours long. And basically, there's a whole tradition. This early tradition can best be defined as some people refer to this as the primordial tradition. You can refer to it as the polar tradition. Or even I would say you could call it the northern tradition as well. And so basically, the best way to describe it, in my opinion, is actually how they viewed time, and how they viewed time in the heavens. So how they viewed their sky clock. What was their primary sky clock? In today's world, it is astrology. And so what are the signs of the zodiac, basically? You have 12 signs along the ecliptic. That's the path of the sun. And so people are paying attention to where the sun is, and what constellation is behind the sun. And so this is the basis of modern day astrology. It's all solar, basically, is one way of putting it. Now, it took me years to finally wrap my head around this and sort of like truly unpack it. But there was a whole time before solar symbolism, essentially. There's a whole time before solar worship. And the original sky clock in this primordial polar tradition, it was actually the fixed stars. And so, we have all of these fixed stars that revolve around a central star. They revolve around the pole star or the North Star. And this excludes the wandering stars, which would be the planets. And so all of the signs of the zodiac, they all go around this central point of pivot, this North Star. And ancient peoples, their primary sky clock was actually looking at the fixed stars going around this central point of pivot. And they were actually really supremely focused on the northern sky. So basically, the middle of the wheel of heaven, basically. And so there's two main constellations there that you'll see, and it's Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. And this is the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper. The Big Dipper is so dense with information, it'll blow your mind.
Really?
Which to me, I find this to still be mind blowing. The novelty has not worn off, because most people can see the Big Dipper when they're children. It's like one of the main constellations, especially if you live in the northern hemisphere. Because it's referred to, they're called circumpolar constellations, because if you're northern enough, they actually don't dip below the horizon line. So for a lot of people, they were constantly there, night after night after night after night, year after year after year. The path of the sun, the zodiac signs, that's not the case. They dip below the horizon line. So there's whole parts of the year where you go outside and you look at the signs of the zodiac, and you're not going to see certain signs for whole parts of the year, right? And so their main sky clock was the North Star and the constellations that surrounded it, basically. And this is a whole different framework. And the reason being is because the North Star is so significant and important. I'm not sure if you guys have ever gotten into anything related to the North Star.
No, actually. I mean, so you're saying that in the more ancient times, it was star systems based upon the North Star rather than based upon the sun?
Essentially, yeah. Basically. And because Ursa Major and Minor are so close to the North Star, they kind of acted as very close companions, pretty much. And that the northern sky was of supreme importance for these people. And so there's endless like rituals and storylines and myths and everything else that relate to all of this stuff. So uh this is basically pre-zodiac. This is pre-astrology, modern day astrology. That the solar worship basically wasn't the primary sort of focus. It wasn't the focal point. It wasn't the main star in the heavens. It was actually the North Star. And so people have referred to this great shift as a polar to solar shift. And so there's actually deities that relate more to this symbolism, this early symbolism, this primordial symbolism, that were referred to as like polar gods and polar deities. I started getting into this information, just a little bit of background. I started getting into this information, and I actually have a friend who's probably like 20 or 30 years older than me, and he got into symbolism way before I did. And so as I was going through my symbolic journey, I would always kind of, ask him questions and see what he thought about certain things and see what books he had read about certain subjects and whatnot. And I kept on going on about this northern polar stuff. And I'm like, man, there's so much information. There's a ton of occult information about the North Star as well, and black magical information. It's a whole entire thing. It's a big, big weave. In fact, I have a PDF on my website, symbolicstudies.com, where you can download it, and I give you basically 27 books on polar symbolism. And so there's way more information about this than people realize, because it's been very much hidden in the modern world, and we live in very solar times. And so anyway, so I was telling my buddy about all this northern polar stuff and the North Star and everything. He goes, you know what? He goes, basically, according to my research, every culture, their supreme deity is a northern god, and is basically emblematic of the pole star, of the North Star. And I found that to be true. And so he mentioned that we come from very different schools of thought and everything else. We disagree on a lot of things, but that's one of the things he mentioned. And sure enough, he's absolutely right. The northern sky has been referred to as like the throne of God or the abode of God. It's a really significant star because, it was the preeminent star in early sea navigation. So if you were sailing around with early tools and whatnot, maybe it was more advanced than what we realized, right? Because of what you were saying earlier. I'm totally open to that for sure. But they say that this was the primary star in sea navigation, because if you knew where the North Star was, you at least knew where you were going, right? If you were going north, south, east, west, whatever. And every compass points where? It points to the north. Right. And so the North Star gives you orientation pretty much in this reality, in this domain. And I found that early kings and lords and emperors, they clearly identified themselves with the North Star. This is a whole entire history that a lot of people aren't aware of, because they gave their people orientation as well. They were the point of pivot, for their empire or for their village or whatever.
Right.
So they believed in this star being basically, if you want to put it this way, at the very top of the hierarchy in the system of stars. And so that means that all other stars are essentially subordinate to this main star. Now, this is when people were geocentric, by the way. And so people weren't yet heliocentric. So once heliocentrism came around, the focus became on what? The sun. So all of the symbolism that was associated with the North Star, and specifically Ursa Major, which has 7 stars, they've been referred to as the 7 stars of enlightenment. And Ursa Minor, the Little Dipper, also has 7 stars. This is really, really significant. And by the way, the northern sky is where a lot of cultures have said is where the stairway to heaven ascends to. And so there's this idea across multiple cultures that the stairway to heaven takes you to the northern sky. This is from, these Egyptian stuff. There's lots of European stuff about this. It seems to be pretty universal, excluding some of the southern, countries. But it was really, really significant and important. And so, so this central star was viewed as being sort of an imperishable star. That's another name for the northern sky and the stars up there. And it was considered to be in the center of the wheel of heaven. And the way a lot of people used to think, in my opinion, from what I've gathered, is they considered the center to be sort of the most potent transcendental part of any system, including yourself. by the way.
Right.
You know,
Makes
so
sense.
there's this as above, so below sort of dynamic that the center of any system is the transcendental part of the system. And so you wanted to embody the center, and you wanted to embody sort of being in the middle of your empire, and that your laws and rules and what you do, your influence basically radiates from the middle, kind of not unlike an antenna or something, right? You can imagine an antenna or a tower, and everything sort of ripples out from there. So a lot of older kings and emperors and things like that, they had this idea that they wanted to rule from the middle, but also from the middle of self. And they had this idea as well that basically that they connected heaven and earth. You know, this is an old concept that they were basically the unifying sort of presence between heaven and earth. And this is sometimes referred to as the Great Triad, that there's a triune relationship between heaven, earth, and man, and that we are sort of symbolically the bridge between heaven and earth. And the best way to sort of embody this bridge is to actually operate from the center of self. So back then, people had more of a focus on the center of self, the center of the home, the center of the community, the center of their empire, all of these different types of things, because that's really where you want to rule from. And I would say that the heart is sort of one of our main symbolic centers in the body.
That's great, man. Just dropping bars on us tonight, dude. And as you were saying that, I was starting to think of, and I kind of had a feeling that Jonathan might bring it up, but it reminds me of the Neoplatonism kind of idea, as far as everything kind of emanating from the center and going outward. And so we are on the edge of that.
So they say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they say.
Yeah. No, for sure. There's a lot of metaphors that make a lot of sense with this. So my basic opinion is that all things emanate from the center and return back to the same center. So the center is really the point of origin and then also return, not unlike our heart, once again, like blood. So blood is pumped away from the heart, and then it also returns back to the heart. And so it's very much like a torus field, if you know what that looks like.
The
torus field is kind of like a donut.
That makes a lot of sense, because we read something the other day that says that whenever you die, you go back to you. And we were like, wait a second, like let me think about that for a moment.
Right.
But if that's the case, and you know, the symbolism at least that you're talking about, I don't know, that might be pretty close to the truth.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is actually the center is everywhere. And so that's the center is the place of non-duality. And so the wheel is actually a really great metaphor for all of this stuff. And so we're kind of all like our own wheel. And basically with the wheel, if you're operating on the outside of the wheel, you're operating on the outside of self. It's the outside of the wheel that basically relates to division, multiplicity. It actually relates more to the physical world as well.
It would probably be the most chaotic too, because you're feeling most of the centripetal force, or centrifugal force rather.
Yeah, no, exactly. You totally got it, man. Exactly. It's the least stable part of the wheel, because it's always turning, it's always moving, right? And so where you really want to be is in the middle of the wheel, symbolically. And so the outside of the wheel, you know, it's almost like a pie chart as well, right? All of the lines for the pie chart, all of the divisions, you know, emanate from the center. So you have all the different wedges. It's like a pizza or something.
Right.
And so when you get to the middle of the wheel, you basically are the unifier of opposites. The middle of the wheel is the most balanced part of the wheel. It's the unifying part of the wheel. And it relates basically to the unification of opposites. So it's the place of non-duality. And there's all these traditions that relate to this. And so it's been said that when you get to the middle of your wheel, you become the unmoved mover, or the prime mover. You cause the wheel to turn by being stationary. And I would say the way you get there is actually by being present.
Right.
And so, which is much harder said, or much easier said than done, rather, right?
Yeah.
And so you get there by being present. So presence to me is centeredness. That is how you stay grounded in everything else. And it's really hard in today's world, because everything's vying for your attention. And I think things move so fast that people are really, I think a lot of people tend to think about the future a lot. And they're always caught up with like what's happening, you know, tomorrow or next week or whatever. But of course, there's a lot of people that are stuck in the past. So this quote, I heard this years ago, but it really stuck with me. And it was, if you find yourself always thinking about the future, you're going to be prone to anxiety, which I think is true. If you find yourself always thinking about the past, you're going to be prone to depression, which I also think is true.
Yeah.
But if you find yourself in the present moment, you're going to be prone to peace. And so there's artwork and statues and things like that where Buddha is meditating in the middle of a wheel, right? Because he is the axis, he is the axle or axis of that wheel.
Yep.
That's the transcendental part of the wheel. And a really great sort of way to think about all of this as well is with our chakra system. And so chakra means disc or wheel. Let's just say we have 7 chakras. That's kind of like the common sort of thing. The number 7 comes back again, by the way.
Yeah.
So we have 7 chakras. If they're all a disc or wheel, it relates to this idea that there are realms above and below, but they're connected through their center. That's kind of the trick or sort of esoteric key, is that the realms above and below are connected through this central bridge, basically. This is the same bridge that different psychopomps or guides of souls like Hermes, this is how they get from realm to realm. It's through the center, basically. And so you have these different chakras, which means, again, disc or wheel, and they're all connected through what? Your spine. Your spine is the symbolic bridge, between chakras.
Right.
And so it acts as the axle for all of those wheels.
Yeah.
And this relates very strongly to just pole symbolism, actually. Funny enough, randomly, I got really deep into pole symbolism. And there's so many figures that have a staff or a wand, just like your guys' logo.
Yeah.
Right? What does that staff actually mean? When someone's holding it vertically like that, you're basically, especially like in the magician card, the magician's holding the wand upward and then he's pointing his other hand down to the ground. He's basically declaring that he is the bridge between above and below, as above. So below.
That gave me chills, dude.
Nice. Yeah. So when you
awesome.
see somebody holding a wand or a scepter or something like that, it's super, super powerful. And people understood this. Most people today, unless you get really into this kind of information, you're never going to kind of consider the power of things like that. But once you notice it, you can't unsee it. And then you're like, oh shit, well, the hermit, he holds a staff too. And then the emperor, oftentimes he's holding a wand as well. And then all of these, puzzle pieces start kind of coming together.
Dude.
That's great.
Yeah,
the center of the wheel gets all the grease too. You know what I mean? In a good way.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right.
It was a few months ago, maybe close to a year ago now. We did an episode on the what's called the Noble Eightfold Path. And and one of the main concepts in there is the middle path. And dude, that's all Buddhism is about, is just staying in the middle path. So man, the symbolism is really everywhere as far as just the center or the middle of everything.
Exactly. Yeah, if you want more overt polar symbolism and you want to study it, the Eastern world has it still intact. And it's through symbols like the wheel, like exactly like what you're saying. And this middle path dynamic, 100%, it's the same exact thing. And so even, it's interesting, China has been referred to as the Middle Kingdom for a long time. And there's actually little grids that you can see. I have it in some of my books where the emperor very deliberately wanted to be in the middle of the empire. And he wanted his abode or he wanted his temple to be in the center because he believed in this middle path stuff. So really, a lot of Eastern philosophy is basically like polar symbolism pretty much, And so the further west you go, the less there is of this. The further east you go, the more you're going to see it.
Dude, what's really interesting about that? Just talking about China and the Eastern kind of countries that embody this kind of stuff, and I believe that probably by now, through all of the symbolism and all the occultism, like especially within our country, like in the United States, dude, if you look at Washington D.C., it is built. Like, dude, it's a pentagram, it's pointing directly at the White House, which is crazy.
It's probably a coincidence, dude.
Yeah, it's just a coincidence. But it's interesting because Washington D.C. is nowhere near the center of the United States. It's it's symbolically, it's almost like on one of those outer spokes up against the edge of the wheel.
Right, exactly. Yeah, this is the interesting thing about all of this. That, again, it kind of took me a while to wrap my head around. There's this really great book, actually, by this guy named John Michel, and he wrote it, and it was called At the Center of the World. And he talks about this dynamic, and he talks about this old science called centrography. And there's still some centrographers left. And what a centrographer does is they locate the center of a place. And so if you live on an island, as an example, at some point someone's going to want to know what is dead center of this island, like where is the middle of the island. Every country kind of has something like this as well. It's like, what's the middle of the United States, what's the middle of whatever sort of space you're talking about, whatever region you're talking about. And basically he gets into this dynamic of all of these kings and stuff having this understanding, the symbolism, this old world primordial symbolism of the center. And he goes through so many examples, especially in Europe, of all of these different towns and villages that essentially, when you translate the name, it means center, it means middle, it means sometimes there's other words that relate to this, like navel is actually a really common one. Heart is another common one, the heart of the world,
Right.
the navel of the universe, things like that. And while reading that book and doing other research, basically the symbolism is that if everything emanated from the center and everything goes back to that center, everything is an expression of that center, basically. So every tree, I live around a bunch of trees. I live in the forest. So every tree is symbolic of that axis, this axis that I'm referring to. Some people, by the way, if you've never heard this before, this is a huge rabbit hole, the world axis. The idea of a world axis, sometimes it's referred to as the axis mundi.
Yes.
But it's this idea that there is a central axis that all things revolve around. And what people believed was that it extends from the North Pole to the pole star, the North Star, and that this is the spiritual central axis for all rotation, essentially. And so every tree is an emanation of that original axis. Again, that scepter back there, that wand, it's an emanation of that central axis. And so what does that mean? That means that symbolically, every location that would be considered to be like a holy land or like a pilgrimage location, what you're really saying, like the deep symbolism of that, is what you're saying is that something happened here that is divine, and that it bridged the gap between heaven and earth. Something transcendental happened here. And so you'll notice that the biggest pilgrimage locations have the exact same claim. Transcendental happened here, and or it's considered the heart of the world or the heart of the universe, and or that this is where the seat of humanity began. That's another really common claim. This is the original Garden of Eden, as an example. And so when you know this, you'll see that a lot of these pilgrimage locations, like the rituals surrounding the location, are fascinating. So one of my favorite examples is the Kaaba cube in Mecca. And so if you're a Muslim, you pray towards the Kaaba cube, 5 times a day, no matter where you're at, right? And so it's your duty, or it's your it's your job kind of as a Muslim to at some point have a pilgrimage there. And so you're going to the Kaaba cube. And so you go to Mecca, and what is the main ritual of the Kaaba cube? You go to the cube and you have you revolve around it, you walk around it 7 times. And you're actually walking around it 7 times counterclockwise.
I was going to say counterclockwise, I believe. Right?
Yeah, that's a really significant point. And the reason I kind of geek out on this one is because the fixed stars go around the pole star counterclockwise. The sun goes clockwise. There's a big difference between a clockwise rotation symbolically and a counterclockwise rotation. A clockwise rotation is more solar, it's more expansive. So symbolically, if you're walking around something in a clockwise fashion, or you're looking at a standard clock with the hands going around that point of pivot, there's actually an expansive solar, kind of more masculine kind of thing going on. With a counterclockwise rotation, it's actually more polar. It's actually more contracting. It actually brings you closer to what? The center. Right.
Which does make sense, because even all throughout nature, the things that spiral throughout nature, I believe, are counterclockwise. If you look at like certain seashells and, rings in a tree and stuff like that too.
Yeah, that's interesting. To be honest, I should probably pay attention to that more with like seashells and things like that. I'm not surprised though. And so, so there's other locations around the world. I was watching a documentary a few weeks ago, and it was about this mountain, Mount Kailash, and it's a pilgrimage location for a lot of Buddhists. And they go to this mountain, really high elevation, not an easy journey. and they go around it. These are called circumambulation rituals, where you're going around this central totem. And it was really interesting, actually. They were saying that most Buddhists go around Mount Kailash in a clockwise fashion, but the old sect, the ones who acknowledge the old world and the primordial way of doing things, they actually go counterclockwise, which this is basically the shift that I'm talking about, the polar to solar shift. It completely changed everything, basically. And so there's a lot of claims of the center of the world, and they have a lot of similar things kind of going on there. And so Jerusalem, right, is another example of a claim of the center of the world. You can't tell Jews otherwise. There's a lot of claims all over the place of, no, this is where the Garden of Eden was, or this is where paradise was, the original paradise, or this is where our demigod ascended to the heavens, or something along these lines. And where I've kind of come to with that is that they're all right. They're all right. They all have the right to make this claim.
We say that all the time. Yep, everybody's right. If you believe it, you're right.
Yeah. You know, and so if that's what they think, who am I to say otherwise? And actually, to be honest with you, now with where I'm at, it's actually the sign of a healthy society. It's the sign of a healthy society that they believe so much that in their backyard, their gods came from there. You know, there's a lot of people that they have nothing like that. They have nothing even close to that, you know? And so I respect it in many ways. So kind of back to the Washington, D.C. sort of thing. It's like, if you believe it, if they believe it, if they're imbuing it with this symbolism, it's kind of true. And that's actually what every lodge, like if we're talking about Freemasonic lodges or different temples and things like that for different mystery schools or religions or whatever, pretty much what the temple or lodge is, it's a microcosm of the macrocosm. So you're supposed to believe that your lodge is the center of the universe. You know, it's like, it's better for your workings and your magic and your rituals and all that kind of stuff.
Which is fascinating too, because it just goes to show the actual energy and power that is embedded into belief itself. You don't even, it doesn't need to be factually absolutely true, because your mind and your belief system, if you pump it up, you know, enough energetically wise and belief wise, it is true in that sense. And so almost like belief, you know, is just stronger than even truth in some senses.
Oh, bro. Yeah, exactly. It's true. And it's so interesting too, because this really fits in line with, you know, just the symbolic conversation we're having. But one of the things with symbolism is that, you know, I'm really convinced that what we were taught in school about the physical world, you know, coming about first, basically, the realm of atoms and physicality, the material universe, you know, what we're taught in school is that occurred, you know, however it occurred, the Big Bang or whatever, and that everything else came afterwards, you know, humanity and our thoughts and, you know, psychology and symbolism and spiritual beliefs and everything else came after that.
Evolution.
I'm of the exact opposite opinion now, where I'm like, actually, it's the realm of thought forms. It's the realm of symbolism. It's the dream realm. It's the spirit realm that preceded matter, actually.
Oh, dude.
So that's why symbolism matters as well.
The first Hermetic principle was that all is mind.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
First one, dude.
That's
exactly.
That's great.
It's just,
you know,
so
and I'll
wild.
say, I'm so glad you've brought it up a couple times now, but just kind of like mercurial hermetic sort of things or whatever. If you want to find a planet or a deity that is sort of the most overt polar god that we have in the planetary system, it's Mercury. Mercury, Hermes, 1,000%. You're going to unlock a whole new level of symbolism if you understand its polar sort of essence. And so, as an example, you know, it's not uncommon for Mercury, Hermes to be associated with the pole, the phallus, the column, or the pillar, right? And Hermes is always holding that caduceus, right? It's a wand with two serpents wrapped around it. These two serpents, however you want to look at it, it represents duality: black, white, masculine, feminine, you know, whatever. And it reminds me very much of two pillars as well, like the two pillars in Freemasonry or whatever. Boaz, Jachin, one is masculine, one is feminine, one is more light, one is dark, etc. But oftentimes in Freemasonry, you're going to see a central pillar, or with the caduceus, you're going to have that central wand. So what's the symbolism of the central pillar or that wand? It's actually polar. You're dealing with a lunar quality, a solar quality, but what preceded both? Polar symbolism did.
And usually within those traditions, it'll be the person walking through both of those poles, and they represent that center pole, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So you see these two pillars. There's always an implied central pillar, whether that central pillar is there or not. And the dynamic is that central pillar preceded duality, essentially, that it's more of a unifying sort of presence. You could even look at it. We're about to enter into Libra season, and I did a whole presentation on this. But you have two pans of the scales, right? Same thing. You're weighing two things. You're contrasting two things and seeing how they fare against each other weight-wise. And so you have masculine and feminine, black and white, whatever. But you need the central pedestal. You need that central column in order for the scales to even weigh against each other to begin with. Mm-hmm. And so it's that central pillar that has a point of pivot, a fulcrum, that actually gives the whole entire system the ability to even function or work or whatever.
Right. And you could even say that central pillar is pretty neutral as well.
100%. Yeah. Exactly. So Mercury is well known for being like androgynous and having both masculine and feminine. So what you're really saying is that there's two in one. And so whenever you have two, there's always a third quality. So man and woman come together, you can create a child, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's always like a third thing whenever two sort of qualities come together. And so, yeah, Mercury Hermes, like thoroughly, in my opinion, it's like the most polar sort of like planet deity out there. And there's a ton to talk about with that, which is why as well, the magician card is ruled by Mercury. And so the magician holds his wand once again up in the heavens, points his other hand down to the ground. He's saying, I'm the central pillar in the house of God. And basically, that card corresponds with the Hebrew letter Bet or Beth, which literally means house. And so that's a clear correspondence with the magician being this central pillar in this sort of space, essentially. And, there's a lot of people who say that we live in a firmament sort of system. I don't know where you guys are at, with that.
I think it is whatever you believe it is.
A lot of people back in the day had this idea that we live sort of in this firmament kind of thing. It's this big dome that you can't escape from it, that this is actually a closed system of sorts. It's not as open as what we've kind of been told or what have you. And when you're dealing with a dome and dome symbolism, the dome is the home. The dome is like a really important, powerful symbol. But the transcendental exit of the dome is that the very tippy top of the dome. That sort of represents the middle of the vault of heaven where the North Star would be and everything else.
Oh man. So, all right. We're talking about the polar almost deities, right? Or the polar deities, right? And you mentioned about how in like maybe it was ancient Rome that they were more shifted toward the polar, and then there seemed to be some kind of shift toward the solar. And it's funny because we recently covered how Constantine and a bunch of emperors that came before Constantine, they always had on their coinage, it was like an emblem of them, but then they had the sun right behind them to help represent like Sol Invictus, and they wanted to essentially be like God on earth to the people, right? Yep. And then so much so that actually overlapped into what became known as like Christianity over in Rome. And that's, as far as my research goes, that's the reason why the sun was always behind Jesus's head in all of the different pictures and whatnot. So when do you think that transition actually happened, that they transitioned over to solar?
That's a really good question. And I'll just say the kind of research I do personally, I don't get caught up on dates. And one of the reasons being is, and this could be a cop out. Some people might think it's a cop out. I don't know what year it is. I don't know how history has been falsified. There's a lot of things I'm unsure of in that way. Even in China, they have like an esoteric, it's not 2025. It's like They have their own year. The Jews have their own year. We have our own year. I've heard so many different claims that there's been 1,000 years added or removed. Also, too, once you get further back in history, I don't know if some of these emperors even really existed. Is it really myth, or were they actually like real characters?
Mhm.
And so for those reasons, I can't really say. What I have heard though, the closest thing I've heard to this is Chinese though. There's this author, his name is John Major Jenkins, and he wrote a book called Galactic Alignment. And basically, any author that has referred to the polar to solar shift, I probably have their books because I just went on a whole entire thing for like a couple years of like anyone who mentions anything, I want it,
Just
Yeah.
addicted.
And so, and so he wrote this book, and basically in one of the chapters, he says that the Chinese people 5,000 years ago were polar, and that it was at the 5,000 year mark from today or from around now is when they transitioned to solar symbolism. And he was saying that according to his research, that they had a polar understanding of the world and of metaphysics and everything else, and that their constellations were in the northern sky. He said that they had 8 constellations around the North Star, and he said they had one per trigram, and that's the basis of the I Ching. I'm not sure if you guys have ever gotten into the I Ching and their divination system.
Talked a little bit about it, but haven't done like a super deep dive into the I Ching yet.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. So the I Ching, just briefly, it's a divination system. It's a lot more than that, actually, but it's all made up of yin and yang lines. So a yin line is like a broken line. There's space
Right.
in the middle. A yang line is a connected line.
Right.
And if you combine these lines and you make 6 different lines that alternate or whatever order, yin and yang, you now have a hexagram. And so they have 64 hexagrams. They make these hexagrams by combining trigrams, and there's only 8 trigrams. So 8 times 8 is 64. And so he said that they had 8 constellations that represented their 8 trigrams 5,000 years ago. And then he said when they became more solar around that time frame, they shifted those 8 constellations to the path of the sun, and then they added 4 more constellations, giving them their modern 12 constellation zodiac. And so I actually think that that's the story that is sort of perhaps universal, is that all of these cultures, once again, they were focused on the northern sky. Once they became more solar, perhaps 5,000 years ago or so, I'm not sure, they shifted their focus to the path of the sun, and then they transferred the symbolism of those constellations to the path of the sun. So when you really are going to talk about the origin of the zodiac, in my opinion, I think that the symbolism of the 12 signs of the zodiac literally come from the northern sky. So that's kind of my opinion about things, basically. But that's the closest thing to like a time frame I can kind of gather. The church, the Catholic Church, definitely had a vested interest in promoting solar symbolism for sure. And so, so the whole entire thing behind it basically is that the pole star was the preeminent star. The symbolism of the pole star shifted to the sun. That's pretty much the basic way of putting it from my estimation, based on my research. And it's interesting when you look into solar symbolism, it acts as a point of pivot, because this is the planets revolve around the sun. And so it's a pole, it's a symbolic pole. The sun is a symbolic pole for the planetary system. It's that hinge, it's that axis for the 7 planets, or the external planets too, if you want to count those. And so even in the sun card, in a lot of modern versions of the sun card, you will see that there's a young boy and he's holding a pole. He's holding a pole and there's a flag on it, because it retains axis symbolism. But what I've learned over time, especially in the occult esoteric world, is that when the sun is referenced, it doesn't always mean the physical sun that rises in the east and sets in the west. In some esoteric circles, the sun is a code for northern symbolism, actually, funny enough. And so when you're referring to the black sun, the philosopher's sun, the invisible sun, what have you, that it's actually referring to a stationary point of pivot. It's not referencing the normal sun. So this is something that really blew my mind when I came across it, that in Freemasonry, you might see a sun. In some paintings, you might see a sun halo thing. There's actually examples, especially in the Eastern world, where people will have sort of a sun-like kind of glow behind them, almost like a halo. And it's not the sun; it's actually the pole star. They're saying that this is the pole star. It's not. It's not a solar reference. And so there's still some solar deities that you can look into for sure. Like in Japan, the name escapes me right now, but there's multiple in the Eastern world where they're very clear North Star polar gods. They're not solar gods.
Is this what would you say that maybe some of the Greek symbolism and Greek gods and whatnot is that more solar or is that polar?
It's more solar, I would say. For sure. Yeah. So any Greek, Roman, everything sense, way more solar. But the thing about it that's really interesting is if everything emanated from this earlier tradition, there's echoes of it all over the place. So its fingerprints are still all over the place. As an example, when you look at newer books that are about symbolism, there's so many symbols where people will say, I'm just going to throw out 3 quick examples. The swastika. Oh, it's a solar symbol. It's about the sun revolving around, and it's this solar wheel. Or they'll say that the obelisk. Oh, it's a solar tower. Basically, it represents it's a emanation of the sun, essentially. Or they'll have other symbols that they say it's all solar. It's all based around the sun. That's a modern construct. That's more of a modern interpretation of things. Wow. In actuality, the swastika is basically it's Ursa Major, which looks like a number 7, by the way. I'm really convinced that the number 7 actually comes from the northern sky. It's Ursa Major. It's the Big Dipper. And that 7, the top of the 7, points you to the pole star, by the way. This is an old way. This is one of the oldest ways people found the pole star is by looking for the Big Dipper, and wherever the vessel points towards, that's the pole star. And so you're looking at Ursa Major go around the pole star. You're basically showing Ursa Major on the pole star once a season, 4 times a year. That's the swastika. And there's a bunch of sources in the Eastern world where they say that that's the case, that they're not even hiding it. It's not esoteric. It's not like an underground thing or whatever. And so, but for Western people, it is, because Western people are so much more solar. And so the obelisk is another good example. Is it really just a symbol of the sun, or is there a polar dynamic? It makes way more sense to me now that I know what I know. It's a clear polar symbol. It's a world axis symbol. And so there's a obelisk, in DC. There's probably multiple in DC. There's an obelisk in the middle of St. Peter's Square at the Vatican. They're all over the place. So to me, it speaks more to this older tradition. But unless you're schooled in it, obviously you're going to have a different sort of perspective on things.
Well, it's interesting because the pole shifts, though, doesn't it? It's not necessarily, it's up there and it's pretty stationary for the most part, but it does shift I was just looking it up, and it depends, but approximately it shifts every 300,000 years on average. It says the last major reversal happened 780,000 years ago. So maybe that predates humanity. I don't know, but
right. Are you talking about pole shift as in like magnetic pole shift with the earth?
Yeah.
So there's a couple different ways of looking at that.
Only reason I say that is because I've heard that this hasn't always been our North Star, that there was a North Star that predated that.
Right. Yeah. And there's a list you can see too of what the previous pole stars were. My understanding is the one just before what we currently have now is in the Draco constellation, which is still a northern constellation. So there's 2 ways of looking at this. Well, I wonder when people refer to pole shift, if they're actually referring to the pole star shifting, kind of like what you're talking about. And that the magnetic shift where, basically the poles shift and everything else. I don't know if that's part of my sort of way of looking at things. But what's been said basically is that there are people who believe, and I've done a number of podcasts about this, of people who are like really interested in this information. And I've met people, not saying that they're right by any means, but I've met more and more people who have the opinion that the pole star actually never shifts. But that the precession of equinoxes still shifts, which I think that's it's like 1 degree every 72 years.
Right.
Last time I checked.
Right.
You know, so that that everything kind of shifts a hair, every 72 years.
Which is why our astrology is wrong, really.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But one of the other ways of looking at it would be people have made the claim that the pole star title of being the star of stars is actually just that. It's a title, just like a king. And so you might have a king that's reigning for 40 years or something. They are the king. They are at the very top of that hierarchy. There's nothing that you can do to kind of, unless you assassinate them or whatever, but they are going to be the supreme sort of unifying principle for that empire, and that they are at the very head of that pyramid. And then that's going to change. So then when they die, or their time has come that, they're going to be aged out of being a king or whatever, the new king takes on that new responsibility. So the glory of that position stays the same no matter what, even if the pole star shifts. So that's one way of looking at it. And that's probably the safer way of looking at it as well, I would say.
That does make sense because, we've done a little bit of research on, before Christianity came to Rome, you would have emperors that, and there would be like little spin-off cults like that were essentially worshiping the emperors over there, but they weren't necessarily worshiping the emperors. They were worshiping the emperor's genius, which is, where the idea of the genie or the jinn comes from, or, the emperor's demon, which doesn't mean demon, like how we see it now. It was essentially just like the higher self, for a lack of a better word, of that individual of the time. And yeah, it's pretty interesting that you would have the emperor in the center of the country or center of the town or whatever, and they would all be worshiping even his middle, his inner, in that sense.
Exactly. And so how do you commune with the divine? In my opinion, it kind of goes back to, you guys have heard this, but know thyself and you'll know the universe, And so the way I put it is that there truly is a symbolic thread that exists between the center of self and the center of the cosmos. There just is, And so the same way with a big tree, a massive, impossibly huge tree, the littlest, tiniest pine or needle or leaf on a tree is still part of this big, big system, right? That it even has a relationship with the deepest roots of the tree, that nobody has ever seen before.
The fractal encompasses the whole.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%. Yep. So it just reminds me of fractal patterns, And so the idea is that when you are in touch with this interior part of self, your inner landscape, that again, you become this bridge. And wouldn't you know, the Pope is the symbolic bridge or the symbolic axis for the church, right? For the Vatican Church. And Pontifex Maximus translates to the greatest bridge builder. And all of his symbolism relates to all of the stuff that I'm talking about, basically. Like when you understand the symbolism, you see that it's all polar axial stuff. And I did a whole presentation on this because the last Pope died, and I was like following sort of the traditions and everything else. And I'm like, I got to make a video about this. It's too juicy. It's too interesting. And so I talked about how the Pope, just like every other leader, represents a symbolic axis to the divine and represents a symbolic pole. And so they are, again, the point of pivot for that tradition or for those people. And so wherever the pole goes, or wherever the axis goes, wherever the Pope goes, that's where everyone's head is swiveling towards, And so because he gives them orientation and everything else, but all of his symbolism encodes all of this stuff.
So essentially the Pope is like the magician then at that point.
Pretty much, yeah. And also, the tarot equivalent is the Hierophant card, right? And so the tarot equivalent's the Hierophant card. The Pope is always sitting between what? Two pillars.
Yeah.
He is the central pillar. He's the central pillar the same way Christ symbolically is the way, and so he is sort of the doorway. He's kind of the guardian of the doorway. Yeah, exactly. To the other side. And he's always associated with keys. So he'll oftentimes have a silver key and a golden key at his feet in the Hierophant card. The official papal emblem or insignia literally is the two crossed keys, the keys of Peter. And so right in the middle of Vatican Square is this obelisk, which literally came from Egypt. And this obelisk, the translation of the place where it came from translates to like the place of 1,000 pillars or something like that. But it's an actual obelisk from Egypt. They brought it over. It's in Vatican Square. If you look at Vatican Square and you're looking at it from a top-down perspective, it looks like a keyhole. And so it looks exactly like a keyhole. And so you actually see a key in the middle of a keyhole, and he's associated with all these key symbolism, all the key symbolism, right? And basically, when you decode what key symbolism is all about, it's basically a mini axis. It's basically a mini pole.
Oh my
And how to use a key. You put it in a hole, and then you have to turn it, right? So there's always this spin sort of dynamic with this axial stuff. You can refer to this whole study, by the way, as axial symbolism. That's another way of putting it.
I wonder, is it the same as far as like the Ankh is concerned? Because it's like, it looks like
very
a key,
similar.
Right?
I would say it's very similar, personally. I think there's other stuff going on there, but I would say that there's enough overlap.
Oh, and usually whenever you go and unlock something, you're counterclocking it whenever you're unlocking it, right?
There you go, man. Yeah. That's interesting. So what I used to say all the time years ago is that a lot of symbolism comes back to poles and holes. And so where there's a pole, there's going to be a hole. Just think of sexual symbolism, And so it's all poles and holes, basically. So it makes sense that the Hierophant is in between the pillars. It's a symbolic opening, but he also has the keys to that opening. He has the keys to the gate of heaven, basically. And there's a ton of other stuff too. I mean, like with the Hierophant card, that card corresponds with Taurus, right, which is a bull. And for a long time, I'm like, how does this make sense? What's going on there? A lot of world religions have a cow or a bull in their origin story. In fact, I'm not sure if you're aware. Have you ever gotten into Manly P. Hall?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
yeah. We actually had his successor come on the show. His name is Ronnie Pontiac. You should definitely have a conversation with him. Y'all would get along so great. But
God.
he essentially learned under Manly P. Hall and had so many stories of Manly. And it was Manly P. Hall helped pay for his wedding to his wife.
wow.
And
Got
it was
married at his
crazy.
house. Actually, he opened his house to him
shit.
to be able to get
Wow.
married to his wife.
So
Yeah.
fascinating.
Damn, that's amazing.
Yeah.
The name sounds familiar, and I know he's made the rounds probably on podcasts or things like that, but I've never listened to him. I should definitely check that out.
Oh, dude, he has like 80s like rocker hair. It's awesome.
Okay. Right on.
Totally cool, dude. Though.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, so his classic work is The Secret Teachings of All Ages, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That book was very influential and blew my mind when I read it and everything else. But what you'll notice when you open it is one of the first, like when the actual book portion really starts, the first plate or illustration in there is a painting called A Group of World Religions. And you start scanning the artwork, and it's all of these little micro scenes from these different religious origin stories.
Uh-huh.
And you're going to see like the Apis bull from Egypt. You're going to see the golden calf from Christianity. You're going to see, these different bulls, throughout world history and these different sort of religions. And basically there's like 8 or 9 different little scenes with bulls in it. And pretty much what he says is the bull is sort of what unifies, all of these religions together. And so he wouldn't start his massive magnum opus book, with that point, unless it was really, really significant.
Right.
And so this goes back to an old idea of there being like a bull of heaven, and that basically the heavens kind of being bull-like in nature. There's like Egyptian paintings and different works of art and stuff where people are underneath this gigantic bull, and the bull has stars in it. And so it's almost kind of like the bull's body is like the firmament itself or something along these lines, right? Well, this is super, super interesting because, in my opinion, this idea of there being an exit in the vault of heaven in the middle where the northern sky is, it fits perfectly with the Taurus field, right? The middle of a Taurus field has the opening right there in the center.
Mm-hmm.
And we have an electromagnetic grid around Earth called the magnetosphere that is a Taurus field. A Taurus field. Why do we call it a Taurus field of all things?
Oh,
And Taurus is
that's
literally
cool.
a reference to the bull. And there's this book by this woman. Her name's Judy K. King, and it's called the Isis Thesis. And she did kind of like updated translations of some hieroglyphs and things like that. And basically in her book, she says that at one point in time, at least for this one sect of Egyptians, they had this understanding that basically when they died, they exited in the northern sky out of this cusp that symbolically they referred to as the horn of a bull, basically. So the opening in the northern sky was referred to as a bullhorn, right? And so that's interesting as well, because literally they also referred to Ursa Major as the thigh of a bull. And so if you look at the Dendera zodiac and you look at the northern sky, you will see literally like a severed bull's thigh. And you will also see this bull's thigh in other artworks that relate to this ritual called the opening of the mouth ritual. And so there is this idea that you would go through this ritual if you were an important person like a pharaoh or whatever. And if you wanted to retain your senses, I guess that was the point of this ritual, was that they wanted to see and hear and smell and taste in the afterlife. They would present this bull's thigh to the mouth of the pharaoh, the opening of the mouth ritual. But sometimes they would use what's called an adze tool, and it's a woodworking tool, and this tool looked like a number 7. What's really interesting is, and this is like, there's a lot of references out there that back this up. The adze tool and the thigh of the bull, they were symbolic references for Ursa Major. That's literally what they were intending with this ritual. And so, because we're talking about the opening of the gateway of heaven, basically. So there's lots of bull stuff in the northern sky. So I think that makes a lot of sense that the Hierophant card is associated with Taurus. It's just, there's just like multiple esoteric layers behind it.
My goodness,
dude.
dude.
And you take it back to even whenever, you know, Moses was going up the mountain to go get the tablets, or the tablet with the 10 commandments that were going to be given by God, and he comes back down and all the people are worshiping this golden calf, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And you find out, well, I found out, and I don't know if this is verifiable, maybe you would know it, but I found out that essentially the symbolism of the golden calf, or at least the deity that they were worshiping through the golden calf, was actually Hathor. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, you know, I haven't heard of that, but there's a lot of Hathor symbolism that does relate to the bull. And I'll say this is another big shift just for people who are interested in symbolism, is that, so there is this major polar to solar shift, right? There's also, what related to that, there's also a major shift from feminine to masculine. And so a lot of today's symbols are over, they're too masculine, basically, you know?
Right.
Over masculinized. That's what I was going to say.
Patriarchal.
But you see this with like Taurus, that Taurus way back when was actually viewed as a cow, not as a bull. Today, you kind of see Taurus as like a masculine bull who's aggressive and things like that. So Hathor has a lot of like feminine Venusian symbolism associated with it. I've never heard that before, but that is interesting. I wouldn't be surprised.
Dude, yeah, I started doing a little bit of research on it because, I don't know, probably 2 years ago, I had like a crazy mushroom trip. Or just a psychedelic trip. And I was like, I don't know, I shouldn't have tripped on psychedelics this night specifically because I was kind of going through it, you know what I mean? Which, if you're emotionally charged, last thing you want to do is take psychedelics.
For sure, yeah.
And I took it and I was like, man, I was really struggling with a decision that I had made. And it, you know, obviously if you have that and you bring that to the table of psychedelics, it's going to make you go even deeper and deeper and deeper into the core of said whatever it is, right? And I was really struggling with it. And so I went to go lay down because I was like tired. I wanted to turn my brain off. It was working overtime, right? I went to go lay down in bed, and dude, this is going to sound like kind of weird. I actually told this story to Ronnie Pontiac. But I went to go lay in bed, dude, and I was like, I don't know what I believe. Can somebody just come and like talk to me, tell me what I'm supposed to do? And you know, right. And kind of a meltdown actually. And and in that moment, dude, I felt a cat. Don't look at me weird for this one, but I felt a cat person lay down in bed with me, dude.
Oh, wow.
And it was like purring up against me, and it was so strange the entire time. I told that story to Ronnie Pontiac, and he goes, "Oh, that's interesting. Exactly the way that you described that cat, it was like a cat female. It was like a cat human." You know, and he goes, it sounds a lot like Sekhmet. So I started doing a lot of research into Sekhmet and trying to figure out that whole story. And then Sekhmet, it connects to Hathor. And that whole story, and it's almost like there was like an evolution of Sekhmet that turned into Hathor, depending on which story you read. And then I ended up listening to if you ever heard of the book called UFO of God by Chris Bledsoe. And
I've heard of it. I haven't read it.
Dude, it is wild because he talks about he keeps on getting like all these orbs and shit showing up in his backyard, and it's wild, right? And a lot of them get real close. Well, one specific night, one came really close, like almost too close, and it almost came down in like this. It came down in like this orb, and it came up on him, and out of this orb jumped out a bull and a woman that was either that transformed into the bull or was riding the bull. I can't remember. And this woman was Hathor, he says. And so it's interesting that the symbolism between Hathor and the bull in that sense, and he, allegedly got a message from her or something like that. He wasn't even tripping on psychedelics, which I find to be pretty damn fascinating. But yeah, dude, it's just weird Hathor bull things. And why is all that coming around, dude?
That's really interesting. I actually had somebody hire me because people reach out and they're like, hey, can you analyze my dream? I've done a lot of artwork feedback for people who are doing a series, and they're like, I want to encode more symbolism, or I'm really interested in this sign. What can I do here? Whatever. So I do consultations with people all the time. But this woman hired me to actually, I don't know who illustrated it, but it was a Chris Bledsoe sighting. It was a painting of a Chris Bledsoe thing.
Wow.
And I remember seeing the bowl. And is there a woman wearing a white gown or something?
That's what he says.
Stories?
Yeah,
exactly. So I had a whole hour-long discussion about that one painting and about all the symbolism that was going on there. I just have to say, because it sounds like you guys are interested in this kind of stuff.
Hell yeah.
Ufology was a huge part of my life for many years. I don't talk about it so much, but whenever it's appropriate, I definitely bring it to the table. I used to have military grade night vision goggles because I really wanted to see what was going on, up in the sky. And I heard this guy on Coast to Coast. His name was Ed Grimsley, and he said he joined the military. He was given night vision goggles for his services, or for duty, for active duty. He said he looked up in the sky and he saw all this bizarre stuff. And I was like, oh shit. I'm like, I didn't know you could even do that. Like, I didn't know that was a thing. And so sure enough, I bought these goggles. I saw all sorts of wild stuff for a number of years, got really involved kind of in a way with the local UFO community of sorts. But and I saw my own orbs, and I had interactions with orbs, and that's a whole conversation or whatever. But it reminded me that there's a group of people. So there's a mountain in the Pacific Northwest called Mount Adams. And there's a guy, his name's James Gilliland. And he runs this kind of like, it's almost like a camp or something. And it's right at the base of Mount Adams. And people will travel from all over the world to go there for UFO sightings. And so I've been there a couple of different times. I actually don't live too far from there right now. I'm probably like 45 minutes away or something. And one of their main things is feline beings, that if you go like into their shop, there's like multiple works of art, and there's multiple things. When you talk to people who've been there a lot, that is one of their sort of things, is that there's like a feline species out there that multiple people have had contact with, and they swear up and down that like this is like the deal, and there's something kind of going on there. So just wanted to throw that out there. You're not alone. I don't know how much you looked into that specifically, but that is interesting.
Dude, that is awesome. Because you sound kind of crazy whenever you say stories like that.
No, I know. Yeah. Well aware. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. And man, just the whole all right, so you were talking about how you kind of had experiences with orbs. I wanted, before we get into that, you mentioned night vision goggles, and I started doing a little bit of research into like the older night vision goggles, and you hear stories about what people were seeing in certain fighter planes, and they would look out and be like, what the fuck, why is there a dragon out here? And like weird, like esoteric kind of things that were going on. And I found out that they were actually using dicyanin goggles originally, which is like this purple powder that comes from a seashell down south somewhere. And it was like the only way that you can get your hands on any kind of purple dye originally came from this one type of mollusk or seashell or something like that. And whenever it was turned into a powder form, and then you put glass on either side of it, somehow it would give the effect of night vision goggles, and so people would look up and allegedly see alien ships and dragons and all of these crazy things. And so I really started doing a little bit of research on that, and I was like, man, I got to get me a pair. And then I looked at them, and they were like, I don't know, like $500. I was like, man, not right now. But but what are your experiences with orbs, and like, what do you think is actually going on?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's a huge topic. Well, I'll let you know what I saw, and then I'll get into what I think is kind of going on. And in many ways, too, it should be no surprise, I have more questions than answers.
Yes.
The more stuff I've seen, the more questions I have. But I ordered these goggles. I paid a lot for them. I took out a credit card just to buy them, and I went to a specific vendor, and this vendor actually is aware that people are buying night vision goggles for the purpose of looking at UFOs and everything else up there.
Really?
So the guy actually gave me like a lot of good, helpful advice on like the model to buy and everything else. And so anyways, so it was monocular. So it was just a one eye sort of thing. And you maybe, the pair that I had, could attach to like a helmet and like, or a scope or something like that.
Like tactical stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And so the first night I looked in the sky with them, my mind was blown immediately, because within a minute or 2 minutes, I saw what people call a TR-3B, which is like a triangular craft. And it hauled ass. And it blew my mind. I'm like, I could not believe what I was seeing. Funny enough, I thought I would see that like every night. I only ended up seeing it like 2 more times after that, after years and years and years of looking. And I would go to the mountains, and I would go to the desert or the coast. And, I would see the most stuff always in the city. I used to live in Portland, Oregon. And so the wildest stuff I have ever seen has always been in the city. So I'm inclined to think there is definitely something going on with people, that there's a reason why you're not just going to see them out and about randomly. At least that's been my experience, right? But lots of lights, lots of orbs. I basically, I showed several friends who they saw something trippy. I didn't see it because they had the night vision. People like well up in tears with what they were seeing and everything.
What do you think they do it in the city for? Do you think it's because of the light pollution that kind of shields most people's eyes from seeing it?
I think ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that there is I don't know what you want to refer to it. Probably the simplest way of putting it was, I think that there's definitely a like spiritual component going on here.
100%.
So a lot of people for a long time have said that, there's a relationship with like demons and angels and UFOs and whatever. I showed a Muslim friend one time, and he saw stuff. We'd see stuff all the time. And he goes, maybe those are jinn up there. They're not moving around like traditional crafts. It's almost like they're moving around, and it almost feels like there's something kind of alive about them, So I think there's something going on there. So I think with that in mind, there's something with people with that whole entire dynamic, the spiritual, potential demonic or angelic sort of, dynamic there. So they have a reason to be there because there's so many people there. Whatever the program is, whatever the big sort of construct is, I don't really know. But that's one thing for sure that I'll say, is that there's definitely a relationship with like the density of people. And I saw more stuff when there was more people around, funny enough.
Which does make
the main story.
It does make sense that he would consider it to be jinn, because jinn aren't necessarily always good or bad. They're kind of a little mix of both, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, the clearest example of something intelligent being associated with these things was one night we were out in a field. I was looking, and I have this laser as well, or had a laser, and I would, point it at anything that was moving. So my wife could sometimes see what I'm pointing at, or sometimes it'll illuminate or whatever. And of course was very, very like, conscious of not pointing it at a plane, not pointing it at a helicopter or whatever. And so what I saw though was I saw an orb of light, and then I saw a denser ball of light, and they were kind of like moving around each other. It almost kind of looked like a dogfight, like with fighter planes or something. So I pointed my laser, I hit one. As soon as I hit it, the dense ball of light completely took off, and then the orb stuck around, and the orb basically descended from the sky and then started sweeping the horizon. and there were trees maybe about, my best guesstimate would be like 100 yards away. And I thought that the orb was going to disappear behind the trees, and it did not. It actually was in front of the trees. And I'm pointing at it with my laser the whole entire time. So my wife, because she didn't have the night vision, she couldn't see it, but she saw sort of the trajectory of the action or whatever. And then this orb started coming towards us. It basically swept the horizon, went even lower, started hovering over the ground.
Oh shit!
Basically came to us and then actually through us.
What?
And, yeah. And so, and then of course, we were like tripping out. We couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it because I was the one seeing it. And I just, I kind of got like the shivers or like goosebumps or something like that.
Yeah.
And then that was kind of it for the night. We were like, okay, we're not going to see anything crazier than that. So we're good for now, But I'll say after this first couple of years of looking for stuff, things really opened up, and I started seeing naked eye sightings. And so the trippiest thing I saw from a naked eye perspective was we were taking a bus from Philly to New York, and right when we were entering the city, there was this crazy metallic blob thing that was hovering like multiple feet above a building, and it was like iridescent, and it was shiny, and it was doing all these things, and it was basically, it felt like it was morphing into itself, and it was kind of like, absolving itself into itself. It was very, very bizarre, and we saw it for probably like 20 seconds. And so I showed her, she saw that. We didn't need night vision. It's during the day. And so it just felt very, very odd. It really felt intelligent. It felt like, it defied physics and gravity and everything else. So my mind couldn't make heads or tails of like what I was actually seeing with that one.
And it definitely wasn't some sort of Mylar balloon. Like,
oh no,
and I know that sounds funny, but
like
I have seen a Mylar balloon in the sky before, and it was red, and I was like, this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Like, because the sun was hitting it just right, and I was like, oh my god, I'm having a broad daylight sighting right now, And then I was like, wait a minute. And as it got a little closer, I could see the string hanging from. I was like, "Oh man, they got me! They got me!"
Right? Yeah. No,
it does seem to be
definitely not that. It was really, really trippy.
It does seem to be a spiritual thing every single time you see them, and it's like almost like connects with you, like spiritually in that sense. We've had like several sightings, seeing orbs out there, and it's usually in times when it's like you're getting people together that you love. I had a sighting with my kids and then my niece and nephew. Me and Sean have had sightings before. Me and our buddy Nick, we've had sightings, both Sean and I with him. And it always seems to be like something like a special time that you see them, and I know that sounds kind of crazy, but like, that's why I don't necessarily attribute to them like demonic in that sense. And maybe that's just our experience. And how are we able to pull any kind of actual information just by looking at some kind of light in the sky? But it does feel like there's some kind of connection that's being had. As a matter of fact, it was like back in April, me and somebody, a listener of the show, we were in Florida for this convention, right? And we went outside. I mean, we were tripping on psychedelics. I do want to say that, but we went outside and we were able to see, I shit you not, probably 20 or 30 of these orbs all going in one general direction over a tree line. And some of them were a lot brighter. Some of them are very dim, but it was like, the person that I was with, shout out to Enough Said Steph, the person I was with, she goes, it almost looks like they're working. Like, it almost looks like they're going from point A to point B and point B to point A and just back and forth. And man, I don't know what the hell to make of it, but I'm happy as hell with the timeline we're living in because this is awesome.
Right. You know what I will say? My personal hunch is I think that these things are, their origin is much closer than what we realize, like where they come from and where they go to. So I think that there's something sort of earth bound or sort of, either within the earth or something along those lines. They've been around for a really, really long time. I personally, I don't think they come from like other like systems or planets or stars or anything like that. I think that's kind of an inversion, actually. I think that they've been here for who knows how long, before us, maybe they're the Watchers or these old things that are discussed in the Bible or whatever. But yeah, it's very interesting stuff, and I think that every single, every generation, I think, kind of updates their perspective on this stuff. So,
Hmm.
some people would refer to them as angels because that's what they're comfortable with, or they might refer to them as fairies because that's what they're exposed to. So it
Right.
would make sense, as people who grew up with sci-fi and all this stuff, that we would refer to them as like aliens or whatever,
Well, I
right?
think what's really interesting, and I'd like to take it back to what you said before, as far as the center kind of going outward and coming back. And so these things, of course, they've been around for probably since the beginning of time, if there is such a thing. And so
Yeah.
you weren't always seeing these things. And so only when you became interested after your studies, and you got the night vision goggles and you started to look into the things, then you started to see them. So like that inner world became your outer world, and then you were able to see it without the night vision goggles and kind of just with the naked eye. And so I think that that's very, very fascinating, and really goes along really nicely with what we always say here on this show, as far as like everybody's right, because whatever it is that you think it is and believe in and really put energy into is probably what it is for you, and so
Sure, sure. Yeah, yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, there's a whole esoteric side of things. I definitely got into, black magic and certain occult authors that had their own opinion about these things and how to like contact these things and all sorts of other stuff. So there's a whole science, kind of an occult science, or whatever you want to say, with that as well.
Oh
And
yeah, with all
so,
the CE5, and then you go
yeah.
back and like look at the father of modern rocketry with Jack Parsons, and that's essentially kind of
Hmm.
what he was doing out there in the desert and
Yeah.
wild things, dude. I think that these things have been around a lot long, like a very long time. They've just, we've named them different things.
Yeah.
mhm.
100%. Yeah, exactly.
Weird, man. I love this kind of stuff. And you are just a full on encyclopedia of information. I mean, I could honestly just listen
It's
to you
impressive.
all damn night. The way that
It's
you're able to
impressive.
retain as much information as you do, I'm jealous. I'm not going to lie, because we talk about a lot of things, but I feel like only about, maybe 30% of it or whatever is retained, which I feel like I'm doing pretty good with that. But you're like Babe Ruth over there, just fucking batting 1,000. It's
Sponging
awesome.
it all up, dude. I
Gotcha,
did want to
man.
ask you one more question, and
Sure.
if you don't know the answer, that's totally fine, because it's more of a psychological thing. But I wanted to point this in regards to the symbolism thing, as far as like someone like yourself can look at something and see the symbolism, and whether or not you respond to it or not, like emotionally or on that mental level. How is it that most people that aren't looking into this stuff is affected by it? Like you said earlier, as far as
Mm.
creating artwork for advertisements, as far as the things that you've created, you've added symbolism. People really kind of revere putting that symbolism into things. Why is it that the normal person, it could be affected by something like this? Is it something that's just passed down through information somehow, or why is it so universal in that sense?
Yeah, yeah. No, these are great questions, man. One of the things I think is that I really do feel as though we have this kind of almost hardwired into us, right?
Hmm.
That we're going to have, the color blue is going to probably resonate on some sort of level. Certain tones, which are also symbolic, they're going to resonate with us. And so, certain animals or creatures or whatever, the serpent, right? Or you hear a
Hmm.
hiss or something like that. It's like there's going to be like a visceral sort of like thing
Yep.
going on there.
Hmm.
And I think that symbolism kind of works the same way in many ways, but culturally, there's cultures who have different opinions about what these symbols mean. So, one
Okay.
culture sees the moon as being very feminine, but there's other cultures who see it as being very masculine, right?
Okay.
And so there's going to be the cultural overlay, I think for everybody, and like where you grew up and how you grew up and everything else. But I also think there's going to be a lot of things that are basically sort of baked into your kind of awareness, like your symbolic awareness, right?
Hmm.
They found that people are going to basically, generate languages, on their own. They'll create their own language, even
Hmm.
if there's no sort of language to kind of pattern off of. They're probably going to generate their own language and their own understanding of symbolism and everything else.
Hmm.
And so I think though that, people basically the what people are exposed to symbolically in today's world, uh just to put it simply, is trash. That you even just look at like buildings from 100, 200, 300 years ago. You look at some of the artwork that people were producing, just a few hundred years ago, versus what people are producing today. The quality has just gone down so much. And so what people are exposed to on a daily basis, is very, very low level. It's very low, like on a vibrational sort of level. And you can make the case that part of this is by design, and I think it kind of goes back to what Jonathan said earlier, is just the devolving of mankind. I think that's totally true. And actually, I have a book recommendation that relates to some of the things we've been talking about. But the author that I mentioned earlier, Rene Guénon, one of his preeminent works is called The Crisis of the Modern World. And he basically goes through on a metaphysical, symbolic level how we've come to this point. How have we devolved so much? And it's because of this removal of the center, basically, like long story short. And so if there's ever going to be like a return of the golden age and our artwork is going to speak to us on like a spiritual level and really kind of get us back in line with the divine, that it's going to be through the return of the center. And in my opinion, through the return of polar symbolism. And there's a lot to be said. There's a lot of people who are becoming more and more interested, in all of this stuff. So, so on one level, I think that what people are seeing for the most part symbolically, I don't think it's really helping them out. I don't think it's really helping society out or humanity out. But on another level too, a lot of people, like especially in the conspiratorial sort of world, they like to say that they're putting symbols out. The Illuminati's putting symbols out, and they're putting you through a ritual, as an example, or that they're initiating you by putting out these symbols, in this music video or whatever. And I don't really see it. Actually, it doesn't really work that way, in my opinion. I maybe used to think that like years and years and years ago, but I don't really think that anymore. Like initiation is really participatory. Actually, you have to participate in it. It's not a passive thing, and most people are just passively consuming or seeing all of these different symbols. Yep. And there's also like a hypnotic aspect with all this stuff too, right? I mean, watching a movie or listening to certain music or doing certain things, it puts you in a certain sort of hypnotic state, right? Yep. And then the symbols actually can permeate, sort of your awareness or consciousness more,
Right, because you're more suggestible at that point.
Completely. Yeah. Right. You're more suggestible for sure. Right. But yeah, I think personally, I have this, I think we are divine creatures, I don't think that we're just physical, or just material beings. I think we're spiritual creatures having a physical experience.
Yes.
And when we're talking about sort of like spirituality, that actually has this sort of vertical orientation associated with it. And this is part of the primordial tradition and polar tradition. People had this vertical orientation. And you have this vertical orientation by going within and by accessing your center. In today's world, people have a horizontal orientation. So it becomes about the masses. It becomes about everyone else. There's no hierarchy. In my opinion, the way I kind of look at it now is there's a hierarchy in the spirit realm that actually exists. And if that's completely flattened out, then nobody's going up that ladder. Nobody's actually ascending, or no one's actually communing with the divine that way. So I think, I don't know if I answered your question there.
No,
that was great, dude.
Came to mind.
That was great.
Okay,
dude. Right. I tell you what, we we are a couple of dudes who absolutely believe in divine timing, and it's so interesting that we have you now, because just the episode before last, we really got to the center of really trying to get to the center of who you are and what we are in that sense, and about how you like that God or the universe or whatever, it's not out there. You don't have to pray to it out there. You don't have to reach for it out there or anything. That is all essentially like right inside of you, like the kingdom of heaven is within kind of thing. And and if people just remember that and bring themselves back to that center, dude, it's always there. It's just really subtle, and that's something that we really started to get to the core of. And dude, whenever you walk around with that level of awareness, just knowing that you're not just some hapless human in a meat suit that is at the behest of some God or whatever, or of some religion, man, it really changes things big time.
Absolutely.
And there is no such thing anymore as any kind of victim mentality, and it's just essentially just about mastering yourself in that point. And there's actually one of our favorite quotes is by Rumi, and Rumi says that I was looking for God. No, he goes, I was looking for God, and all I could find was myself. And so I went looking for myself, and all I could find was God. And I was like, man, that's everything that you need right there, in a nutshell, essentially. So, man, we're divine timing. So yeah, this was awesome, man. This was amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. But if you could, I wanted to ask you, because we always have to do a tarot reading at the end of every episode. We normally just do one card for the episode. Are you like, as symbolically understood as you are, like, do you have a pretty like good understanding of the tarot?
Oh yeah. Actually, the tarot is something that I spend time with every day, and I've been doing. I started symbolic studies in 2020, and I think maybe it was late 2020 or early 2021 is when I started doing tarot readings for people. And so literally every day I'm spending time with the cards. And as a system, it's really fascinating, and it has given me so many insights. So yeah, that's probably one of my strongest sort of tools in my toolkit is the tarot deck. Yeah,
man, we got to get there. And that's something that, like, we've been doing, just a one card read for the past 2 years that we've been doing this show, just towards the end of the episode. And we feel like we're slowly coming along as far as understanding the symbolism. Just, you get a lot of the same cards over again and and stuff like that, but we're not to that master level yet. What did you do to really get to that level of just, you're able to look at a card and you know exactly what it means?
Yeah, it's so interesting to me. What I tell people all the time is that the tarot scales to your awareness, and it sort of scales to your consciousness. And so if you're just getting into it, you're going to pick up a certain amount of symbolism. If you've been into it 10 years, you're going to pick up another level of symbolism. And then if you've been into it 20, 30 years, there's still going to be things you don't know. And so, so to me personally with the tarot, I mean, I just spent a ton of time with it for like a year straight almost, where I bought a deck and I would literally spend every single day with the deck, looking at the cards, meditating with the cards. There's all sorts of different practices you can do to kind of level up your understanding of the cards. There's even meditations of going into the cards, like literally going into the cards and writing out kind of what you're getting from it. So I did that with a small study group for a little while there. And then, just buying, tarot books and reading through them and everything else. What I try and tell people though, as well, is that, take it one card at a time. So for whatever reason, if you're really interested in your sun sign, as an example, let's just say you're Virgo, that corresponds with the Hermit card. So it's like, spend time researching the Hermit card. You're not going to be able to compress years and years and years of study into a small amount of time, really. And so to me, it's like, have quality time with the cards, but then have quality time with the cards that are sort of speaking to you right now. And there's certain cards that speak to me. And, I've had like experiences with some cards where it just like what the card represents and embodies is like imprinted in my brain because I had this real actual sort of thing happen with it versus just being cerebral, intellectual, and just like reading about it or whatever.
Right.
So I try and tell people that too, even though I spent a ton of time trying to cram in as much as possible. I think I realized over time that you actually just want to spend time with the ones that actually interest you right now. And that's what I've done with symbolism too. I don't read through these symbolic dictionaries from cover to cover.
Right.
I wait until there's a symbol that I'm really interested in, and then I'm all in, and I want to know as much as possible about it.
Damn, that's the way to do it right there. That being said, Sean, what is that card, sir?
We got the 9 of Swords.
Oh.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting.
So what are you thinking?
Well, I mean, just have to say, I just brought up the Hermit card. One interesting thing that you can do, it's kind of a little tip, is look at the numbered card in the major arcana that corresponds with the number that you just pulled.
Okay.
So when you actually do that, a whole nother level of symbolism unlocks. So with the 9 of the major arcana, we're dealing with the Hermit card, right? I just brought that up.
Oh, wow.
Okay, the Hermit has everything to do with going within. There is a withdrawn sort of nature with the Hermit. The Hermit goes and seeks isolation. He's going through a period of isolation. This isolation is all in an effort for him to sort of unveil different parts of himself, right? Veil symbolism actually relates very, very strongly to Virgo as well. The number 9 as well, knowing something about numerology really helps. Have you guys ever heard of the property of 9 always coming back to itself?
I believe so. Yeah.
Like, 5 plus 4. And, if you get a bunch of 9s, it essentially just comes back to 0, right?
It always comes back to 9. And
Or
so,
9, yeah,
so
yeah.
like 9 plus 9 is 18. 1 plus 8 is 9.
That's right.
You
That's
add
what it
another
is.
9.
Yep.
2 plus 7, that's 9. 36,
Mhm.
45. And so, no matter how many times you multiply 9 or add 9 to itself, it always reduces back down to 9.
Yes.
And
And
then
you can keep going up as high as you want with that, and it
forever.
still works. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Same thing when you half 9 and use decimals. So half of 9 is 4.5. Half of that is
Oh,
2.25. So it works all the way up and all the way down if you're
right.
doubling or multiplying, or if you're like halving the
Right.
number from 9. And so the number 9 always seeks a return back to self. It's kind of interesting that we're talking about the center and everything else.
Yes.
The
Holy
return to
shit.
self, it's a return to center. So while this card, it looks like this person, obviously, they look distraught.
Mhm.
They're having a sleepless night, right? They're having a restless night.
Yeah.
We're talking about sword symbolism. So the sword relates to air. The sword also relates to the mind. The mind has a way of always projecting as well. You just kind of like a sword, right?
Mm.
The tools that relate to the masculine elements, the sword would be air, and then the wand would be fire. Both of these tools, the sword and the wand, have this projection sort of dynamic, right? With the wand, it's like energy being sent forth, just like the phallus, basically.
Mm.
And so she's projecting ahead, she's projecting something. And so she's upright. She's supposed to be horizontal, but she's actually upright, right? And
Mhm.
notice that all of the swords are horizontal. That's
Yep.
supposed to be where she's at. She's supposed to be resting, right?
Oh, right.
But instead, she's actually awake. I think that's one of the brilliant things about that card specifically, is that
Oh,
she breaks
right.
the pattern of this horizontal nature with
Right.
everything.
Oh, wow.
And so she is withdrawn, and so she has her head in her hands, right?
Mhm.
And so she's obviously like considering, she's thinking about something that probably has happened. That's kind of the way I look at it, is that the part she played in something, right?
Mhm.
Or what happened between her and someone else, or whatever the circumstances.
Mhm.
But the hopeful thing about this card, in my opinion, and I don't see a negative card in the deck. That's another one of my
Right.
sort of things, right?
Mhm.
But there's a couple of hopeful things about it, and one of them would be that we're almost at the end of the line. So this is like we're almost at the 10 here. This is the card just before the end of this suit, right?
Mhm.
Excluding the royal court cards. And so whatever circumstance she's going through, sort of the finality or the end of that cycle is coming to a close. We're really, really near sort of that place.
Mhm.
Also, whatever she's going through, it's a restless night. It's not like she's gonna live another day, basically. That
Mhm.
basically the circumstance, when you have sort of fucked up or done something that you're not like proud of, it can feel very devastating. And you need to feel that too, in a way. But it's not something, it's not as sort of earth shattering or sky falling as it can kind of feel in the moment, right? And
Mhm.
so I think that whatever circumstance this woman is going through, it's going to be a very similar sort of thing, that she's going to mend, she'll figure things out. Because we're talking about sword symbolism, one thing that always comes up, what does the sword do? The sword cuts, the sword severs, the sword pierces. And so the sword is our greatest tool to let things go, and it
Mhm.
often is related to letting things go. So there's always probably a dynamic when I think about this card, something that had to be let go, a relationship or whatever it might be, some sort of circumstance or whatever.
Mhm.
And this can be a positive thing or a negative thing. Ultimately, I think it's all for the positive, even though you're going to feel emotional about it, perhaps.
Of course.
So the sword is always there to help us alleviate some baggage and kind of get some weight off of our shoulders. And this is sort of a key that I am reminded of all the time: living lightly. You really want to live lightly. You don't want to be weighed down by the world and sort of your circumstances. We're all sort of journeying through life. And so, just like a true traveler or journeyer, just like the Fool card, the first card of the major arcana, symbolic of zero, he's living lightly. He's
Mhm.
smelling the roses, and he carries very little with him. He has a pole with him with a little sack. It's called a bindle. And so he is basically traveling, but he's not weighed down with baggage. And so the sword is always there to help us sort of alleviate some baggage. And we all need to do this every once in a while, actually. You don't want to be
Mm.
too weighed down by your circumstances. You don't want to be too weighed down by the world. That's operating on the outside of the wheel.
Mhm.
To get to the inside of the wheel, that's actually you want to be light, And you want to take things sort of as they come, moment by moment. There's even rituals that relate to this. The weighing of the souls ritual in ancient Egypt. When you die, your heart is weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the feather of truth. If it's lighter than the feather, that is favorable for the afterlife transition. If it's heavier than a feather, that is not favorable for the afterlife transition.
Right.
So, I see it that, this woman is struggling there, but it's not the end of the world. And, this cycle is definitely kind of coming to a close there. And so
That's
again,
amazing,
this withdrawn
dude.
sort of dynamic, sometimes you need to go through, tough circumstances and trials and tribulations. And what you realize when you're actually going through something that is a struggle or an obstacle or a roadblock, it sometimes feels as though the world is against you. But what you'll find is your struggles are often, I would say actually all the time, it's just sometimes hard to see it, they're all gifts in disguise. There's something to be learned there.
Oh, absolutely. Dude, that was incredible. And now we're going to go through all of them. So I hope you have enough time. That was very, very impressive, man. That was awesome.
Right on, man. Thank you.
Man. Thank you.
No. I appreciate it.
I don't think I've ever, because we've pulled this card several times, and I don't think I've ever, I mean, sure, we have our book and everything, and it's great, but that was just super impressive.
Never went that deep. Yeah, that was, and honestly, that's better than any explanation that we've ever read, for sure. So,
and from now on, going forward, every episode, you are going to be our tarot correspondent, and we're just going to call you randomly.
I'm happy to do it, man.
Just messing with you.
Yeah, man, this was such a very. This episode was so great, man, and we really appreciate you coming and spending the night with us. Well, I guess you kind of did. This is an awesome conversation. If you could you let our listeners, we call them the one, could you let them know where they could find you, sir?
Yeah, of course. So symbolicstudies.com is the best place to find all my stuff. From there, you can, find my YouTube or Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, things like that. I am available for tarot readings, right? So if people want a personal session with the tarot, we can definitely set that up. You can purchase a reading on my site. I also have a Patreon as well, patreon.com/symbolicstudies. And I'm actually going through the major arcana right now. So I'm about to release an episode on the star card, and each episode is about an hour long. And so that means that I have like 16 or 17 hours worth of content just for the tarot. So I'm doing the whole entire major arcana. So when it's all said and done, it'll be like 22, 23 hours long, something like that. So I've been working on that for like many, many months. And so people, if they sign up for my Patreon, you can also sign up through my site too. They'll have access to that. And I've got a podcast and a bunch of other things going on, but symbolicstudies.com is where you can find everything.
Awesome. We will have that. Dude. We'll have that link down in the show notes below. And yeah, man, this was such a enlightening conversation, and we will definitely have to do it again if you're up for it.
Oh, I'm definitely into it, man. No, this was a great time. You guys are super chill. I appreciated the conversation for multiple reasons. So yeah, absolutely. We'll do it again.
Oh, awesome. For sure, dude. Definitely. I love those episodes. Like in the middle of the episode, I just think to myself, like, this is one of my favorite episodes. This is so fucking awesome. Just the information and everything is just so deep and resonant, dude. So thanks, man.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
It's so good. All right. Well, look, we are going to get over to the meditation. For those of you that want to join us in said meditation, then come over to patreon.com/metamystics. That link is down in the show notes below. It's the best way to be able to support us. If you sign up over there, we have several tiers. We have the cheapest tier, which will give you access to be able to get the shows a couple of days in advance. You'll be able to see all of the video content. It will be completely commercial free, and you'll be able to slide into our DMs. Maybe you have a suggestion for the show, or maybe you just want to be able to reach out to us personally. Either way, we answer those every day. And then we have the Wonder Wednesday tier, which is $8.88 a month. And with that, you get everything that I just mentioned. Plus, you can join us every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Central for the live show. And sometimes we have a guest. Sometimes we just bring a cool topic. But either way, we're getting the coven together, and that's what we like to do. So if you want to be a part of that, go ahead and click the show notes down below. But also, I will have Mario your link down there as well for anybody that wants to be able to come and check you out. And yeah, that being said, we're going to get over to the meditation. But if Symbolic Studies came here and he taught you anything, it's that you don't know what you don't know. So don't just get weird.
Stay weird.
What you think, bud?
Dude, that was amazing, man. I think that that's a good one, especially for people that are maybe questioning their ability to get into that meditative state, because like, and asking that question to your higher self, I don't know if it happened for you, but it was more of like it wasn't a thing where I had to kind of calculate, and try to, what kind of answer should I give myself? It was pretty much just like almost like when you're in a past life regression and you're asking those questions to your higher self. It's matter of fact, and it is in a very kind way. It's not like harsh. It's not like the ego side of yourself that can really just, talk shit and like make you feel bad. This was more of the enlightened version of yourself, and it was like so spot on. I mean, I'm not gonna that question and answer was for me, you know what I mean, because it was a little bit personal, but so good, dude. It's like I was saying though, it was a really good test to, understand or at least see how deep you can get within a meditation. Because if it happens like that, it's like, well, I'm not even gonna question it,
dude.
because it felt so honest and so pure, if that makes sense.
And coming to the understanding that we have, it's like, man, once you know what that is, doesn't it just make it so much more comfortable to be in that zone?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's
you know
home.
what I'm saying? It's not, it is home. Like, that's the thing, is that it is the most familiar place you'll ever go. Yet most people don't even know it's there. Not consciously, anyway.
No. And to think of the people that never will, you know what I mean? They're just so immersed in the physical and in the outside world, and not even, they'll never see that inside world. And it's kind of a bummer, man, because there's definitely some genius there, if you will.
100%. And you know what it makes me think of? Like, just imagine all these places that were, built around trying to find the most energetically perfect place to be able to go and meditate, whether it's inside of a pyramid in the king's chamber, or it's on certain meridian line, or whatever the case may be, wherever the center of the world is, or anything like that. Dude, I'm telling you, we need to go out to that place in Arizona. What is the name of that place where everybody goes?
Oh yeah, fucking
Damn, you live there.
I know. I fucking live
I always forget the name of it too.
It's fine. I'll figure it out before we're done. I promise you.
Yeah, not Soma or Sonora. It's something like that, isn't it?
Oh, God damn it, dude! It's where all the fucking spiritual people go to. It's like so stupid. We'll cut this out. It's I want to try to get it before you do.
I was close.
Go ahead.
Just
go ahead. I know you were.
Sedona.
God damn it. Damn. So stupid. You caught me outside of my higher self state. So that's on me.
I'm just coming down from the treehouse. Okay.
Right, dude.
Yeah, Sedona. I wonder what it is like. It has to be so amazing to just meditate out there, and then imagine tripping out there. That would just be.
Oh God. Yeah, no, I can almost guarantee that it would be like one of the best places, because like Mario was saying, all of these different cultures around the world, they believe that, their center, their, temple, whatever it is that's in the center of their village is the most powerful space. It's the most spiritual, or the most whatever flavor they want to put on it, and so if you truly believe that, regardless if it's on one of those lines on the earth, and all of it, you can get as weird as you want with it, but I think if you believe that, then you're definitely going to have an awesome experience.
Oh yeah, for sure. And what's interesting is that especially Sedona, it's located on that 33rd parallel that people talk about.
Of course it is. Yeah, of course it is. Yeah.
It says Sedona, Arizona is located along the 33rd parallel and is famous for its stunning red rock formations and energy vortexes, which attract many visitors seeking spiritual experiences. This latitude line is also significant in various cultures and is associated with other notable locations such as Asheville, North Carolina. that.
I'm still kind of embarrassed that I couldn't remember. I've never been there. I've lived here my whole life, never been there. So we'll definitely have to make a trip for sure. I don't know why, but I can visualize you like finding some random boulder and you're just like sitting up there by yourself, like just doing your thing. You're like, I already see that happening for some reason.
Yeah, I could picture that.
It's probably happening right now.
But just like I imagine, how much more that could be, because the ancients believed that, and they believed it for some kind of reason. They believed it for good reason. Why else would you align pyramids and certain structures perfectly square with the exact star that you're trying to be like exactly beneath, Yep. And that's what I'm trying to say is imagine what we just meditated on for 10 minutes and amplify that by sitting somewhere else in a more energetic vortex kind of place. I wonder what that experience would be.
Oh God. And I bet you the sky is amazing over there.
Has to be.
Just ridiculous.
Yeah. I bet you they're like real, conscious of light pollution and stuff over there too.
Oh, I'm almost certain of it. Oh yeah, dude.
They got a lot of places like that.
It's very beautiful from what I've heard, in the pictures I've seen. But yeah, dude, we'll definitely have to take a trip out there for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest, dude. Like, I know that we like to look into the weird stuff and like the parallel that you were talking about and everything else. But like, let's be honest, like the center is everywhere we go. You know what I mean?
It radiates,
everywhere is the center.
Yeah, I mean, we radiate outward, as you said, and I thought that was actually perfect, the way that you were kind of bringing in Neoplatonism and talking about the one that goes into the nous, that goes into the world soul, goes into the physical world, and I think that there is a microcosm, macrocosm kind of thing to that, maybe that is what our physical reality is, but maybe it starts on the inward and expands outward, and then there's emanations emanating from you know what I mean?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, and that's going on pretty hardcore right now. You know what I mean? People choose what they want to see. They see it. They get more either disturbed by it or like it just depends on what's going on inside of you. And so, I don't think it's any coincidence that we start to see an influx in certain things in the sky, or when we're having certain conversations and we're talking about something that's very important to us, it means a lot to us, and then we see something, it's like our inner world literally reflecting back to us from outer world.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing, dude. It definitely feels like that. And just by taking all this information and actually applying it to your life, man, it's one thing to know it and to hear people talk about it and even to talk about it yourself and think about it, but to put it into action. Dude, I'm telling you, like the stuff that we talk about, and you know this, but like everybody else, the stuff that we talk about and the stuff that we contemplate on and think about and just obsess over and just really try and understand it all, it's like, and you put that into action and like, actually use it almost as a center point, to be able to look at, through this lens out into the world. Man, it really does all start from the inner world. Like, there's no doubt about it. Like, I don't even question that. Like, it is 100% whatever is going on in the outer world is a reflection of the inner world. That is a foregone conclusion now.
Yeah, and I think the hardest part is just getting yourself centered and getting yourself that level of awareness. All these things are easier said than done. We've said that before. I mean, even understanding a lot of the things that we understand, we still find ourselves, or at least I find myself, having to go, oh yeah, and like remind myself and then try to get back to that awareness of just the present moment and everything else. And so, I think that's all it takes is, knowing who you are and just go from there, man. But just constantly reminding yourself, until you don't have to anymore. And then you're just embodying it.
You're just like, I am bliss at that point.
You know what I mean? Embodied.
Yeah, it's funny because I've been really struggling these past couple of days because I lost my wallet and I can't find the damn thing. And I've been going through the motions. I, tore apart my car. I tore apart my apartment. I even went back to the place that I used it last. And of course, nobody was of any kind of help over there. And the past couple of days, I've been doing spells. I've been doing rituals. I've been doing meditations. I'm like, dude, I busted out the dowsing rods to try and find these fucking things. And it is nowhere. Like it's just gone. And And so in that meditation, that's what I was really trying to do. Like, you know,
Right.
ask your higher self any kind of question. And I got to a point where I was like trying to zoom in and zoom out and where was this? And, you know, trying to almost change up my thinking pattern because maybe my thinking pattern is wrong and I need to look at it from another angle kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I got to a point where I was just like, man, it actually just feels so much better to not even think about it. And
Right. Let go.
And in that moment, I just let go of everything, and the stress just melted off of me.
And nothing outside of you changed. The wallet's still gone.
Well,
As
it's
of right
still
now.
gone,
But
yeah.
your inner world was like, you know
Yeah,
what I
and,
mean?
and honestly, maybe my stress over needing it is almost causing it to, you know, magnetize away or
Yeah.
demagnify or whatever it
Mhm.
is, right?
Yeah.
Or demagnetize. And because whenever you hold that vibration of I need to find something, I need it, it's what you're really saying is I don't have it, I don't have it. And so maybe that is almost amplifying, you know, whatever is going on around me to not, I don't know. I'm thinking about this 6 ways, you know, 100 million ways to try and figure this out. And, you know, I kind of, I don't know. I've kind of just like let go at this point, dude. Honestly, like if I find it one day, I find it one day. If somebody ends up, you know, running up my my debit card or whatever, I locked all my cards already, so it's totally fine.
Right.
They're just gonna find my, you know, other information, which is unfortunate. But yeah, I'm just letting go of it, and you know, it'll work out how it works out. It's out of my hands.
Yeah,
So
I have a feeling you'll find it now. Because you have just kind of let go, and you're gonna be like, "Oh, it's right there." What a fucking idiot! And now I remember putting it there.
yeah,
You know,
it's
like,
gonna be something like that.
Yeah, I have a feeling.
Yeah, I've just because I've been putting a lot of effort trying to find it, and now I'm just like, hey, dude, I did everything that I needed to do. I searched everywhere. I did as much work as I possibly could to try and find it. Now it's out of my hands, and that's something that I've really been trying to train my own self about. Is that like, if there's nothing you can do about it, why stress about it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like don't get.
It's not gonna help, dude.
Yeah, no amount of stress is going to reel that thing back in anyway.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was all just a lesson in the first place.
There it is. I think everything is, dude. Everything that happens that seems unfortunate is a potential to learn. You know, so
That's it.
we are.
So, all right. Well, our next episode will be. We're actually going to be doing it on the autumn equinox, also known as Mabon. So that's going to be a fun episode, and we're going to get pretty ritualistic in that episode. I'm telling you right now.
Of course, I would expect no less.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. And actually, whenever that episode comes out, I believe it comes out either the day before or the day of the autumn equinox.
I want to say you were looking into that, and it is in fact the day of, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, it should work out pretty perfect. So anyhow, this was, man, what a fucking banger of an episode. This was so much fun, and
This
definitely,
was one of those,
dude,
one of those episodes.
one you don't forget.
No.
You know, we'll be talking about this episode 5 years from now.
And we'll definitely have him back several times as of that point.
He'll be a homie for sure.
Oh, for sure, definitely.
But anyhow, yeah, I guess we'll boogie up out of here. So we'll see y'all on the flip side.
Bye, guys.